on a motion brought by a government member seeking the approval of the House for government's proposed programs and projects within the different sectors. Time is allotted usually for 2 sittings per week over a 6-week period following the close of the budget debate, conducted at the start of the new fiscal year in April. It should be noted that the agenda can be adjusted, with items being added, removed, or replaced. If you're planning to attend a session at Gordon House, here are some rules you need to keep in mind. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. It's almost time to go to the main event, but before that, let's get the answer to the parliamentary trivia question. We asked, according to the standing orders, no member is allowed to address the House or a committee of the whole House for more than 30 minutes on any subject. Is this true or false? It's true. According to the standing orders, no member is allowed to address the House or a committee of the whole House for more than 30 minutes on any subject. However, the mover of an original motion is allowed 45 minutes for her opening address. Now over to the proceedings.
Mr. Leslie Campbell, Mr. Clark, that's Mr. Hero Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Ms. Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Phillips, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Mr. Golding, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Dr. McNeill, Ms. Neto, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Michael Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Wright, Dr. Chang, Dr. Chang,
Statements, Ministers.
Mr. Speaker, today's proceedings will commence with a statement by the Minister with responsibility for education and the Minister of Energy and Technology will also make a statement. At questions and answers to questions, the member from Central Westmoreland had asked a supplementary question, which I had undertaken to give the answer. Today, he's not here, and in any event, I didn't get around to it, so I will handle that next week. Mr. Speaker, in addition, we are going to have the presentation of the resolution by the member from Western St. Andrew, and that is resolution, member's motion number 78 at item 31. And that will be, unfortunately, the member from Northeast and Minister of Labor and Social Security will not be able to make a presentation today. And so we will have the contribution to the sectoral presentation by Dr. Kenneth Wykeham McNeill from Western Westmoreland. That is the order of business for today, Mr. Speaker. So with your permission, I will make my statement to the House. Could you bring a... Thank you. Draw this thing out here. Just draw it out here. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Speaker, this is the first time I'm going to make a statement, having been assigned the responsibility of taking charge of the operations of the Ministry of Education. But I thought it was important, having gone through a new system of testing primary school students for entry to the secondary school system, grade 7, that I make a report to the Parliament on exactly how that exercise has gone. In addition, we are laying on the table of the House a statement dealing with the same subject, and I have conveyed to the representative from Central Kingston, an opposition spokesman on education, extending him a copy so that he can follow the presentation quite easily. I take this opportunity to update this Honourable House on the results of the inaugural sitting of the primary exit profile exams, which were administered over the period February, March, and April of this year. 42,000 students, of which 22,298 males and 20,538 females, were registered to sit the examination. 100% of our students were placed in 7-year high schools, and that is the full high school program. The Ministry was able to achieve this as a result of the provision of additional classrooms to a number of our schools and the phased upgrading of Stony Hill Primary and Junior High, Discovery Bay All Age, as well as the commencement of the process for micro-practicing school. Additionally, 32,155 or 80% of students were placed in one of their preferred choices, and they had provided 7 choices that were their preferred choices in which they would wish to be placed, and 80% of those, there are 7 choices, but in most cases it dealt with 1 to 5. Their 5th choice was the last. Since 2015, parents have been given the opportunity to indicate 2 additional schools, which is in addition to the 5, making it 7. And that is how you come up with a difference between 5 and 7. These 2 additional choices were selected from a cluster of schools that were within a 10-mile radius of their attending schools, so that they didn't wish to have the children go to be extended outside of a 10-mile radius. So wherever possible, it would be restricted to 10 miles for them to have their selected choices. 14%, that is 5,903 of the students, were placed in secondary level schools that are in proximity to the schools they currently attend. A further 2,353 students, or 6%, were placed manually in secondary level schools in approximate to the address they submitted. Before I move on, Mr. Speaker, let me point out that we placed more students this year in schools of their preference than we have done before. Last year, 30,789 students were placed in schools of their preference. This year, 32,155 students were placed in schools of their choice. That must be an educator. Mr. Speaker, the first sitting of PEP represents a new approach in the reporting of the scores while ensuring that the scores are aligned to the competence-based transition policy and the alternate pathway for secondary education. One of the major goals of the National Standards curriculum is to enable students to become critical, reflective thinkers, creative problem solvers, effective communicators, and natural collaborators. The primary exit profile aimed to assess these skills and competencies as outlined by the National Standards curriculum. In other words, it was not just a test that represents the outcome of a swatting exercise where you get a score based on the amount of retention that you have held and you get a pass. In this test, we sought to assess virtually the whole personality of the student and to determine those areas of strengths and weaknesses for the purpose of strengthening those areas where they are already strong and for building those areas that they show signs of weakness. In reporting students' achievements of the National Standards curriculum at grade 6, the following 4 categories are used for all 4 subjects. There's the beginning category, and that's where students at this level demonstrate limited or no evidence. I want to be very careful here. Limited or no evidence of the required competence necessary at grade 6. Not at grade 7, but in grade 6 class where they are sitting the exam, they have shown no evidence of the required competence necessary at that level, as specified in the National Standards curriculum. These students will need intensive ongoing academic support at the grade 7 level. It is important to pause here to indicate that the strategy going forward is not to separate these children, thereby giving them a sense of inadequacy and failure, but to incorporate them in the grade 7 programs across the country, but with facilities to give them special attention, special training, so that they would be able to develop. Second category is developing. These students at this level demonstrate partial evidence of the required competence necessary at grade 6 level, as specified in the National Standards Compliance curriculum. These students will need targeted academic support at grade 7. Targeted, where in some instances we find that there are strengths that can be built on. In other areas there are deficiencies. But these tests enabled us to target those specific areas for particular attention. In the area of proficient, students at this level demonstrated adequacy and gave evidence of the required competence levels at grade 6 as specified in the National Standards curriculum. These may need minimal academic support and/or extended learning activities at grade 7. Limited. And the final category, highly proficient. Students at this level demonstrated an advanced level of competence necessary at grade 6 as specified by the curriculum. They may need extended learning activities at grade 7, but they are the most equipped to deal with the subject matters that will be required of them in grade 7. Overall, students performed well in this inaugural sitting of the primary exit profile. Mr. Speaker, the results from students' performance in the various subject areas shows that less than 10% of all students are at the beginning level, the lowest level where they show no ability to deal with the matters taught to them up to grade 6. There are less than 10%. This means that less than 10% of the students who sat the examination demonstrated, as I said, limited or no evidence of the required competencies and skills for readiness in grade 7 in all subject areas. Hello. Mr. No. Give me a glass of water now. See if you get a glass of water. No. The students who are categorized as beginning will need, as I said, intense ongoing academic support in grade 7. Understand this. These are the ones in beginning who are in grade 7. At the other end of the spectrum, Mr. Speaker, a range of 6% to 13% of students are categorized as highly proficient in the various subjects. This means that these students demonstrate an advanced level of the required skills and competencies for readiness in grade 7. Based on the students' performance, it is evident that the Ministry of Education, through this strategy, is on the right path. Mr. Speaker, 40% of students who sat the test have demonstrated proficiency or advanced proficiency in the concepts, procedures, and application of skills required for the National Standards Curriculum in mathematics, while 52% of the students are considered to be developing in the area. Let me read that again. 52% of the students are considered to be developing. It must be noted that of this 52%, there are 14% of students who are on the cusp of moving into the proficiency category. What that means is that when we do the percentile with a range, they're at the top of the particular range. So they are on the cusp of moving into the next category. So we are very hopeful that with the proper techniques being used in the schools, that we will find them moving up the scale. These students are considered to be borderline students, and with some targeted support, will develop the skills that will enable them to become proficient in mathematics. In the area of language arts, Mr. Speaker, 55% of the students who sat the test have demonstrated proficiency or advanced proficiency in reading, writing, and research skills required by the NSC in language arts. While 36% of the students are considered to be developing, it must be noted that of this 36%, there are 12% of students who are on the cusp of moving into the proficiency category. So that the top of the percentile scale, and they're on the cusp of going into the proficiency. So they're on an upward trajectory. These students are considered to be borderline students, and with some targeted support, and I want to emphasize the terms targeted support, will develop the skills that will enable them to become proficient in language arts. 49% in the area of science, 49% of students who sat the test have demonstrated proficiency or advanced proficiency in knowledge, skills, and competencies required by the NSC in science. While 44% of the students are considered to be developing, it must be noted that of this 44%, there are 10% of students who are on the cusp of moving into the proficiency category. This distinction is important to understand that we are anticipating a larger number of students entering the higher category as we go forward with our program of training. These students are considered to be borderline, as I mentioned before. The analysis of the student performance in social studies showed that 63% of students who sat the test have demonstrated proficiency or advanced proficiency in knowledge, skills, and competencies required by the NSC in social studies. That is the best performing category in the test. It is important to note that of the 4 subject areas, students' performance in social studies had the best outcome. This is commendable in that there was a greater emphasis on students' ability to apply research skills in social studies context. Bearing this in mind, the majority of the students achieved the knowledge, skills, and competencies required, while 34% of the students are considered to be developing. It must be noted that of this 34%, there are 12% of students who again are at the cusp of moving into the proficiency category. These students are considered to be, as I said in the other instances, borderline, and we are expecting them to move into becoming proficient in social studies in a reasonably short period of time. The ministry has once again placed 100% of the students in full secondary institutions. 100%. Previously, a portion of the students were not included in the national statistical data. They were kept outside of the total data of students who entered the test. In this particular instance, under the PEP, all students are included. All, even those at the very bottom, were all brought in to the consideration. 94% of our schools are now places of choice, and this is worth emphasizing. 94% of our schools are now places of choice, in that students are now selecting a variety of schools as their preference schools for placement. Mr. Speaker, were we to be in a position to have more schools enjoying the reputation of some of what we might call the more traditional high schools with a big reputation and good performance, if we broadened the base, then this contentious situation that we have every year would not exist. because there would be an adequacy of placements across the island so that every student would feel satisfied to select any of the schools that are available. We are not there yet, but that is the direction that we are moving in. Another important piece of data that I wish to share with you is that 84% of the students on PATH have been placed in schools of their choice. 84% of the students on PATH. This means that that category of student, these are the students who are challenged and have to be assisted through PATH. And the fact that 84% of them could have gotten their school of choice is quite remarkable, despite their challenges. And within that grouping, we are going to see some miraculous things take place in the educational system. Special needs students who were so identified have been placed in schools with the appropriate facilities. Special facilities are provided for special needs students. Those who did not indicate the special needs on their registration form will be accommodated in special schools once brought to the attention of the ministry. So we're not leaving any child behind. Once you indicate and it's brought to our attention, we will be attending to them. The ministry is providing an individualized report for each student. There has been a lot of talk about individual scores and individual reports. And this is really an answer to the question asked by my learned friend last week. And the fact of the matter is, member, we will be publishing the individual scores and the results of the tests that were taken on each student. And that will be released within a matter of days. We are expecting that that will be released next week, if not by the end of this week. And that should satisfy a number of persons who have been apprehensive and have adopted a posture of doubt. We want to remove all doubt as to the quality of skill and expertise that was brought to bear on this exercise in the interest of the children. The results for the secondary levels, that is, receiving schools, will be available online by 6 a.m. on the 5th of July. So you can go online and you will see these scores. Mr. Speaker, in concluding, I take this opportunity to express thanks, particularly to the team at the Student Assessment Unit, who coordinates, and that the administration of the PEP, as well as to the other members of the ministry who played a supportive role. Let me make it very clear. Persons who are not directly involved, armchair philosophers, doubting Thomases, I want to make it absolutely clear that as the person at the wheel in the ministry, I saw firsthand the quality of work by the people who work on these things. And words cannot express our thanks and appreciation for their effort and contribution to the educational system. I wish to commend all the teachers and institutional leaders in our primary level institutions for their work in preparing the students for the PEP. These kids are among the brightest set of children ever to take tests in this country. You only have to go to a school and talk to them, and you will see what I'm talking about, where they are so sharp and ready and anxious to move on up. They are moving on up, these children, and we are there to support them. The entire Ministry of Education, Youth and Information congratulates our students on their performance and wish them continued success in pursuing an education. The public is therefore being assured that we are moving in the right direction as it relates to the preparation of our children and their future, the whole child. Not that portion of the child that speaks to their capacity to recall, but their capacity to read, understand, and explain themselves. A rounded person is what we are striving to achieve for the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Twits.
Whoever is in charge to, thank you, facilitate the microphone.
Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the questions that follow are in the context of an appreciation and an endorsement, indeed a seminal participation by this side in the philosophy and implementation of the primary exit profile examination over many years. Secondly, it is a policy of those who speak on this side that we do not seek to cavil or to seek partisan advantage in matters to do with education, and therefore the questions must be seen in the light of seeking to give constructive critique and encouragement. And in that regard, we also join in thanking all those whose efforts have brought us to this particular point. The first question is one of clarification. Will the Minister confirm that the individual student grades for each subject will be available in the disclosure that he has scheduled for next week? Would you like me to ask several questions? What would you prefer? I'm seeking directions. Do you want one by one, or do you want a series and then you reply? All right, that's the first one. That one is very important. The second one, the Minister in his statement has emphasized the great need for remediation at grade 7 for more than half of the students in all or some of the areas tested. Would the Minister please state in detail what are the provisions for remediation at grade 7 that are going to take place? And thirdly, will the Minister indicate whether the strategy of incorporation of those who are at inadequate levels to perform in high schools, rather than separating them, how that is going to be managed in schools, in grade 7 classrooms, where with the existing establishment of facilities and teachers?
First of all, the grades, the marks that each student obtained will be published. Right? The test is given online. Online? Yes, online. The remediation is on the basis of additionally trained teachers. We are seeking to expand the number of teaching staff and to those teachers that would have been specially trained in remediation so that they can assist the children to the maximum. There are some that we will need where we have our greatest challenge is in the area of mathematics, science, and of course English language. Those are, as you know, the areas of greatest challenge. And we will be seeking to expand the number of teachers and the levels of discipline that they are particularly skilled in to give these students special attention. Because the whole idea here is that we did not, and I welcome this immensely because it's something that has given me a lot of thought, although I wasn't in education. But there's nothing worse than when students sit in the same classroom and take the exam, and there are some who move on and they are left behind. And in some instances they are separated. So they are left to feel a sense of inadequacy, not having been able to keep pace with the others. The strategy now is to be inclusive and to try to make those who are more advanced even influence those who are lesser developed, so that we are going to be impacting on those through a collaborative approach, mixing the children together and creating a sense of confidence. Because the child who is left behind and does not get remedial work done with them will eventually carry that resentment throughout their lives. And it will impact on them later, and those are the prime targets for gang membership and so on, because of that sense of inferiority. And jealousies develop in the society. And that goes with them right through society, right through their lives, even after they are finished with school. And we're making attempts now to cut that and be more inclusive in our approach. And on the question of your last question was on how are we going to deal with the physical situation of having the beginners with the proficient students in the same class. In the same class. They can't be taught in the same way in the class with the proficients. What is going to be done is they are going to be channeled into different parts of the facility where they'll receive specialized training, but brought back into the total cohort as a part of the student body. So when you say to a child, where are you going to school? Well, child says, take a school, I'm going to Excelsior. Now, previously, if that child had not done well, that child would have been left behind. But now that child was given an opportunity to make a choice. And based on the marks they got, they happen to have ended up in Excelsior or whichever, Arden, whatever. Now, they are not as proficient in all the subjects, but the new strategy is to have them included in the general cohort of what you might call the more advanced, the medium range, and the less advanced. In addition to that, member, which you will appreciate, and we have discussed it, we are going to twin schools. So, for instance, I had a discussion with the principal of Arden, and we're going to twin member from Southwest. We're going to twin Haile Selassie with Arden. So that the children from Haile Selassie will be exposed to the atmosphere of Arden. And vice versa. So they will impact. And that's how we're going to move the entire society forward. In the question of separation, the majority of them are really only going to be separated for maths and language. Maths and language. And so those subjects that they weren't able to cope with at the grade 6 level, through separation and specialized attention in those 2 areas which are critical along with sciences, we will get them prepared to move into grade 8 and onwards. And I am absolutely certain, based on the programs outlined to me, I'm absolutely certain that next year, not only are we going to see higher performance levels, but we are going to see an improvement in the total performance of the entire cohort throughout the country in the areas of maths, English, and science.
Mr. Speaker, will the Minister state how many additional teachers and with what qualifications will be provided, beginning when, for this extensive program of remediation, which he posits will be able to overcome the ineffectiveness of some 6 to 8 years of previous education? Will the Minister also indicate what additional sums of money are going to be available to those schools which have this particular challenge? Will the Minister appreciate that those who are engaged in, who have difficulties in these fundamental subjects, don't go to Excelsior and Ardennes? They are concentrated in other schools, which the question is, will he be able to provide additional resources in time for their additional care? Mr. Speaker, will the Minister please apprehend the challenges? There's one particular school, and it's by no means exceptional, where 70% of the grade 7 students are entering reading at grade 3 level. That's not unusual. The results bear that out. And I'm anxious to be assured by the Minister that this miracle of remediation, which he posits is going to take place in grade 7, so that everybody can escalate on a reasonably equal level in grade 8 and onwards, is provided for. This side wishes to support that wholeheartedly, but is very skeptical that either the funds or the human resources are available in time for that to take place. And would the Minister further answer whether or not this period of the summer, this valuable period of interstice between the grade 6 experience and the grade 7, ought not profitably to be used to take part of the burden of this remediation rather than be not so used?
Member, I can say that the task is not going to be an easy one because, as you know, teachers, you don't produce teachers overnight. To be a good teacher, you have to have not only the academic ability, but you have to have the experience. You have to have the ability to be able to communicate, and especially in these specialized areas of maths and English and science, it takes a special skill, and that can only be developed over time. So we realize the challenges that we face, but I am advised that a number of the coaches that we will need have already been identified. They have already started to identify these coaches, because we view this element of the development in education as being crucial if we are going to establish a country where we can safely say that our educational standard can be measured against all countries of the world. Because we are training youngsters to take their place not only at the workplace in Jamaica, but throughout the world. So we've got to get it right from the start. And that's why we are insisting that we are no longer separating our children, no longer identifying them as deficient and all the rest of it. Amen. So we are going to, now as far as the money is concerned, let me tell you this. I'm sorry the Prime Minister left because he has to go overseas, but I will tell you that I've already made my case to the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister for additional money. Additional money for this coaching and additional money for a very essential area of development, and that is in school feeding program. Because if you don't get the kids coming out of pre-primary equipped to deal with primary, then if you leave it until grade 6, then you're going to be more challenged when you have to get them from moving from grade 6 into grade 7. So we've got to start that program very early. And so we will need the money to support especially the economically challenged children coming from communities that are very difficult, where some of them don't get adequate nutrition because of a lack of resources. And PATH is just simply there helping, but it is not the answer. We need more money. We need it spread wider so that when they sit with their other kids, they can hold their own and be awake and alert rather than falling asleep by 10 o'clock because of nutritional deficiencies. So it's a twin approach: nutrition and additional coaching for those who we identify as not quite ready for the challenges that face them in grade 7. That basically is, in a nutshell, our strategy going forward.
Mr. Speaker, thank the Minister. And let it be understood that the crisis in education is not a one-sided affair. It is a chronic issue that all of us have to face. So there's no apportionment of blame. Mr. Minister, would you help us on this, though? The coaches that you speak of and the hope that you have that they can actuate this entire remediation of probably more than half or more than half of all the students going into grade 7 within 1 year. Would you explain why these persons may not have been available during the primary experience so as to prevent that which we now face? And would you assess the likelihood of their success, having regard to the fact that these young people, particularly those in the beginning category, have in fact had 8 years of education at public expense, and by definition of the results, have little or no skills to deal with high school, yet are being placed in high school and expected to perform at the same levels and pass the same examinations, ceteris paribus. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, finally from me, I think, could the Minister tell us how many students in the high school are on PATH? My own estimation is that it's about 50%, with another 15% or more ought to be on PATH by virtue of their economic circumstances. And we need to understand the gravity of that problem in order that the very laudable commitment that the Minister has spoken of for additional resources can be properly supported.
I must advise you that, in fact, further to the point you made earlier as to why we don't take the opportunity to start the program right away during the summer. Well, it has already commenced. Yes, it has already commenced. Psychoeducational program of assessment is ongoing right as we speak. We're trying to prepare them early to enter grade 7. Everywhere. 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 This is a game, our attempts here. And you know, colleagues, I've made my position clear. I said it at several places, and I'll repeat it in this honorable house. For all persons appointed as board members, they leave their politics at the gate. And the school's the same thing. We will not entertain any other type of consideration but the focus on improved education for our children. That's it. You and I have met. We are at one accord in terms of a certain strategy, which I've acted on already. And we will continue to do that. Because this is not about who is right and who is brighter and who had the better idea. This is a program that has come to fruition after years of study. years of study, when a demand for a comprehensive review was undertaken under the leadership of the then Minister of Education, who today is the Prime Minister of the country. That's when it started. Well, it might have been earlier, but that is when it started with intensity. And it has culminated in this day, which we should all be proud of and supportive of. Because everywhere I go, I've been to every region in the country. I've spoken to every principal, board chairman, what have you, across the country in 3 months. And I can tell you, based on my exposure, I'm satisfied that this is moving in the right direction. You're right. 50% of the cohort are on path.
But frankly, there are another 15 or 20% who need to be on path, but the process who are not. And therefore, in terms of the inclusivity of which you aspire and which we thoroughly support, the Ministry of Education is encouraged to see to how those can be engaged. Because if you don't, then they become another set of casualties. Yes. And none of us are served by that. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, many of the students at the beginning and developing levels have grave social problems and are in need of psychometric testing. Currently, we have the Microcare Center as the only facility in the island, and it is overburdened. What plans are there to increase other centers, to provide other centers, and to increase the budget for those centers there?
Member, your point is well taken. We need to expand it. Psychometric assessment is the order of the day, the modern world. And when people speak about absolute scores, let me make it clear that using scales, which means that if you're at a certain level of proficiency, you fall within a range. So you don't identify the bottom and you don't identify the top as an individual student, what they got. They are in that range. So here again, you remove the stigma. You remove the stigma, and that's what we want, because this exercise is not to really, although it is important and useful, it is useful only to place the students. It is only useful to place the students. After the students are in school, then the program, as you say, of assessing, continuous assessment, training, improved teaching, improved nutrition, everything that goes into making the whole person. So that as a country, when you speak of a Jamaican educational system, you can be satisfied that you are among the best, and we are offering the best across the world. Forget about all these great big countries. We can be as good as anywhere else in the world if we adopt a policy of collaboration, cooperation, and understanding of the issues that we face. So your point is taken. I will examine the specifics for you and let you have it. Or ask your spokesman, just give me a call. He knows my number. We communicate.
In some regional facilities across the island to deal with the psychometric testing.
I mentioned earlier, member, that we have engaged coaches, and we have categorized pathways for students who need special help. And we have already engaged special coaches, which are special educators. These are not just your ordinary teacher who get up and teach a class every day in maths or English. These are specially trained educators that we have already commenced the engagement of these people to do exactly what you're talking about. And the only way we are going to expand that is with the support of the Ministry of Finance to give us the required resources to do that. That's the objective, so that every child has an equal opportunity.
Minister, permission to speak from a seat other than my own, Mr. Speaker. I assume that silence meant consent, so I'll proceed. Minister, you spoke about the psychosocial assessment that will be done for the students and that you have started. I was wondering if included in the set of assessments you are doing, in keeping with the concept of the whole child, if you are also doing your hearing, your sight, your eye test, your hearing test, and those as well, to be included in the set of testing to be done. Also, just two other quick questions. You said also that 94% of schools are classified as schools of choice. And I'm assuming that this is choice 1 to 7. And that number sounds good. Of course, the question behind that would be whether or not you are satisfied the speaker doesn't. I was saying that you are saying 94% of our schools are included as schools of choice. 94%. But the question now goes to whether or not you're satisfied. If you were to put all this 94% on a list and you were to do an assessment and audit of each of these institutions, would you be satisfied with the quality education that they are able to deliver based on the resources that they have available? Because I believe that is also an important part of it. And then finally, there are students who, either because, for whatever reason, for several different reasons, are placed at schools that are within a certain radius of the primary school that they are coming from. And I believe, Minister, in that is an inherent bias and prejudice and discrimination against those individuals that are not able to afford going to a school that would be either associated or near to one of those high schools that would be preferred. And I was wondering what thinking you had in terms of getting rid of that discrimination, because there are some individuals who go to the school that is closest to where they live, and therefore they are not close to one of those high schools that anyone could think of as one of choice.
You know, for the life of me, I don't remember the school, the name of the school in Portmore. Cedar Grove? Is it called Cedar Grove? Cedar Grove Academy. All right. That school is emerging at a rate that hitherto was not considered sufficient to encourage a student who passed for Campion to refuse to go to Campion but to stay at Cedar Grove. That is the whole secret of what we're trying to achieve. That when we raise the level of the schools in all areas, including Haile Selassie, that to go to Haile Selassie, despite the challenges, would provide them with a level of training that would enhance their ability to make a decent living and to move their lives forward. That's the overall objective. You ask about the natural in human nature to be prejudicial towards certain locations, etc., and the limits that are placed on the learning ability of students in those environments. It is existing. Of course it is. And some of the children choose them instead of trying to go up to Immaculate up in Hope Road, up in Constant Spring Road, because they are comfortable in their setting, in their environment. Now, because of the challenges of violence, etc., the attentiveness and the level of concentration that is afforded them is not as great. Our task is to make those facilities increase in efficiency, the teachers increase in tolerance and intensity of focus on what is the mission at hand, and that is to educate children. We visited Haile Selassie together, and we saw that their marks in mathematics, I won't even bother to announce that level here. It is so depressing. But the reason, of course, as I indicated when I spoke to them, there's not enough focus on mathematics because it's easier to teach them other things that they excel in. And as a result of that, a lot of brilliant students drop out of the system or are overlooked because their natural born abilities are not brought to bear on the problems that mathematics offers. But if they were trained properly, and if they were made to feel that it is something they can challenge and overcome, we would find a greater performance in those schools. It is a major challenge, but it is one that we have to confront, and we're trying to confront that with these special educators who are trained to teach people, the children there properly. That's a strategy.
Just for clarity, Minister. So the question about the choices 1 to 7, I believe the question was asking what are you doing or what are some of the plans to ensure that the 94% of the schools that we're looking at schools of choice, that we are finding a way to increase the resources. And some of it is not just intensity. It is what they have as their labs. It is the surroundings. It is whether they have a perimeter fence. It is whether they are safe. It is, you and I have spoken about some of the things. I just wanted to make sure that I could have on record your commitment to ensure that these schools are all going to be elevated to a level, not just that we have expanded the number of schools that people choose, but that the quality of education that they can expect from these institutions is also rising.
Let me just capsule it, if I am understanding it correctly, and give you an assurance. There is no intention nor strategy that tolerates differential treatment because of where schools are located. No matter how poor the community, no matter how modest the training levels are, our mission, our obligation is to make sure that the resources available are distributed equitably to give every child a chance. Not equally, equitably. To give each child a chance. But that's why you are going to get students leaving Payne Avenue, Haile Selassie, where incidentally I grew up as a boy, going to Arden and benefiting from that interaction. And you're going to, and both communities are going to benefit.
Mr. Phillips.
Minister.
No, Mr. Stewart.
We on this side have been clamoring for the longest.
Members. We are all, or should be by this time, fully aware of how we ask questions. We are not having a debate. The opposition spokesman on education did what had to do. We are allowing some further questions, a further elucidation of the matter. Mr. Phillips has a question, not a debate. Mr. Phillips, your time.
No, Minister, the whole issue of the psychometric testing and the institutions, the microcare institutions that are in some parishes to do some of those testings. The cost of doing the testing is an inhibitant to most of the parents. So once they get recommended to take the child for testing, they don't. Is the Ministry of Education to ensure that these children, these students get tested, would look at subsidy towards having these students being able to. Secondly, the whole issue of, because I have seen schools where quite a large number of students leaving grade 6 to come to grade 7, still not at the reading at even grade 3 level. Yeah? We keep on talking about fixing the system, but trying to fix it at the primary level, you're still not getting the results. So we need to fix it at the early childhood level. The certification of these early childhood institutions costs most of these institutions quite a bit of resources. Will the ministry look at a policy on looking at financing these especially the government-run institutions, financing them to the tune where they can be certified, but also after the certification there isn't any additional resources in learning, an additional trained teacher, so the students are not leaving any different after certification than before certification. Is there an intention by the ministry to look at the whole system of certification to see what additional resources, learning resources, that these institutions will get from the ministry?
That's a very good question, because the truth is you put your finger on something that is very important in all of this. Our ability to assess. That's all it's about. Our ability to assess the capabilities of each child. Unfortunately, a large percentage of students do not enter the primary school system through the pre-primary system. For a number of reasons. The parents can't afford it. So the child waits until it is time to go to primary school. Imagine that you're going to go into a primary school system at a stage where the students you are going with have already had pre-primary training. So you start at a deficiency. You can't keep up. You lose courage. You lose faith. You feel angry because you're not able to cope. And you built into that child is a level of resentment and hostility and a sense of inadequacy. So it starts from that point. And what we must seek to do is to try to get more and make it mandatory that every child goes through a pre-primary process. Because if you don't get the kids early, by the time they get to primary school, you may think you have arrived, but you haven't arrived. You should have started earlier in the pre-primary stage. So to assess them through these psychometric units, if it's not now being provided by the ministry free of cost, we will look and examine the extent to which we identify the need and, if necessary, support more so that we can get assessments early so that the process of development will take place at an early stage. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. I am told that the microcare through this assessment process is free. Free of cost. So when you couple that with the vigilance in ensuring that all children that enter primary school go through a pre-primary level, so that at 4 they are equipped, then we will move this whole process much further than we have found it here now. But remember, I want to just remind you, I've only been in this thing for 3 months. So as soon as I go a little further on, I'll learn a little more, and I'll share it with you, and we move together.
Minister Williams.
Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
One minute, Mrs. Williams. 1 minute. Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell, are you saying
Questions.
you have now finished your telephone conversation and you want to ask a question?
I have some questions to the Minister of Education, sir.
Members, I'm really going to take an opportunity at this time to say that members were told from the beginning of this Parliament that texting and receiving texts in Parliament is okay. But dialing and talking the telephone at your ear is not accepted. And I'm going to ask members, please, don't wait until the press start to criticize us. Let us live up to the standards set out in the standing orders. Mr. Campbell, you have a question? A question, not a debate. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have several questions. The first question is, in terms of the raw score or the percentage, what exactly does proficiency represent and what does advanced proficiency represent? That's the first question. The second question would be, in terms of comparatively speaking between this year and last year, how does the pass in math, science, social studies, and language arts, how does it match up this year versus last year? That's the second question. The third question is that, based on the document here, it would seem that 60% of the persons who did math did not receive a satisfactory mark, as opposed to saying it one way. If you look at it the other way, is that 60% of them did not receive a satisfactory mark, and for science, 51% did not. So the majority of those who sat math and science did not actually get any proficiency, were not in the categories of proficiency or advanced proficiency. The third question would be, what is the root cause of the problem? Is it with the teacher delivering the substantive matter, the pedagogy, as they would say, or is it in relation to the students and their own learning style abilities that would fit into their assessment with microcare and those things, or is it in relation to the facilities that are present to actually facilitate the teaching process? And the fourth question, in relation to a statement made on the front of the document about Discovery Bay All Age being upgraded to accommodate some of these students. One, the idea of the upgrade at Discovery Bay, the block of classrooms to be used is actually a block that was constructed by a former minister, the member from Central Kingston. Outside of that, there has not been any new construction at Discovery Bay All Age to facilitate an upgrade of a high school. The community has not been made aware as to what the plan is, as to what the plan is. Neither has the member of parliament, to be frank. And through you, Mr. Speaker, to the minister, what could be the good reason why all of the students who are supposed to go to this newly upgraded high school are those who are at the beginning level? None of the students at the developing or the proficiency or the highly proficient level will be placed in this school. So essentially what we're doing, we're starting a new school and we're placing 100 students at the beginning level.
I am trying to figure out what is the rationale behind it, and the logic of it escapes me. I'd also like to know, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister, why it is that the community of Discovery Bay that we are displacing the younger children, the primary level one, who will now have to travel elsewhere, and the older ones who are at the high school level are the ones who are going to school in Discovery Bay. Because my understanding is that the primary level students will now have to go to a different school, whether it's Waltham Abbey or Keith or somewhere, that they'll have to take 1 or 2 or even 3 transportation in order to get there. And we're doing that to the younger student. It would make more sense to me if the younger students were more central, and the older one who can better maneuver their way around would be the ones who would go out on the periphery. Also, for the construction that is to take place there, and also construction that took place at Brownstone High, the Caribbean Maritime University was responsible for construction. Now I want to know if CMU has the skill set to be doing construction of these facilities, and why it is that these things seem to have taken place without any adherence to the tender process that we've become also familiar with.
Well, first of all, let me do the last one first. Does CMU have the competence? To be honest with you, since I have been there, I haven't had a chance to assess CMU's competence. Perhaps you could ask the former minister if he'd guide you. Because the process is one that started very long ago, where they engaged in repairs to facilities. And so far I have not heard complaints as to the level of efficiency of the work undertaken by the CMU. But that's a detail that suggests to me that there's a lot of local issues involved there that I'd have to get the actual facts and respond to you on those. In terms of the scores and the deficiencies, the proficiencies, how they actually are brought about is exams are taken, and on the basis of the results of the student, they are classified into categories. Now, proficiency, the score that they would get would be 50 to 79. 50 to 79%. Right? In highly proficient, it will be 80 to 100. And you will find that a number of students get 100. And you might find that some students who get 100 don't end up at Campion or Immaculate or Arden. Because they don't have that in every area that they are tested. There are several areas that they are tested in. Not the least among them is ability to reason, where you can study for the exam. You're in Spanish Town and you want to get to Halfway, what's the best route you would take? To be able to think before they answer, reasoning. And that's what we, as I said earlier, that's what we're trying to do in these tests, to develop the capacity of the student to think. As before, it was just a matter of you get a curriculum, you study it, you swat it, and you pass well because you have a good memory. That's not what education today is about. Education today is about the ability to reason. Right, so we agreed on that. So you have the proficiency. I told you where the proficiency and the things are there, right? Now, when we move students or we recommend schools within a 10-mile radius, it is where the population is. To the best of their ability. And it's not a perfect science. It's not an exact science. So what they do is they try to use within certain proximities what is most convenient, where the population center, etc., and all these factors are brought into consideration. Now, if there's a particular oddity that exists in the Discovery Bay area between the primary and the could sort an exam like you for 2 nights, and you get 100 because you can retain. Now, that's all you get. In this PEP, you get an assessment of the whole student, all aspects of the student, and how best to focus on those areas that will enhance the ability of the student to go forward and the challenges that they will have to confront. So as I said before, the development of the whole child. That's what we're building, a whole Jamaican child. Now, as far as the teaching, you said, is it the fact that the deficiency lies with the student or with the teacher? It's a combination of both. It's a combination. In some instances, we have this, as I term it, a child has been at school for 4 years, but they've really only been learning for 1 year. Because at the end of the 4 years, they don't know any more than they knew after the first year. Because of deficiencies within the system which we are seeking now to correct. And this assessment will give us an idea as to who is best able to train a certain cohort. Because we are able now to pinpoint areas of deficiency and place students, teachers who are best able to deal with the specific areas. Because you're developing now maths, English, science. Those are the tough three. Social studies, everybody get good marks. But in those three, tough business. So we need to get specialist teachers to go in and deal with that. And in addition to that, the very slow ones that did not develop as quickly, not that they're not as intelligent, they're just slower in development. They may become more brilliant later on. So they have to be able to be properly coached, properly prepared. And by doing that with patience, stick-to-itiveness, understanding, and care, we get over the hurdle. So quite frankly, member, what we have been doing is trying to introduce this new system with all the challenges that are confronted and try to deal with them individually and collectively as quickly as possible. So when the students go to school in September, they will not only have a nice clean school to go to, properly equipped with furniture and everything else, they will have a new approach, a refreshingly new approach that will be able to be compared. So when you go to America and you say, what range do you have? And you tell the range, it compares with a child in America or in Europe, Finland, Italy, where have you. That's what we're seeking. We can't isolate ourselves in the area of educational testing. We must be able to stand the light of day and compare with other institutions across the world. That's the only way we're going to get these youngsters equipped to roll into the top engineering schools, top medical schools, everything. That's our strategy.
You have a further question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I have further questions. So essentially, if the raw score for proficient is 50 to 70, Member, you really should allow your contribution in the House to be more than just a Robbie Rose at the back, you know. Mr. Speaker, the next question that was asked that has not been answered. The 100 students who are being placed at Discovery Bay are all students at the beginner level. And I'm trying to obtain what rationale behind placing the entire new cohort who are at the beginner level in that facility. And Mr. Speaker, I remember once it was said, a minister said that some of us can remember. It is true. Some of us adhere to rote and some of us critical analysis. Yeah. But memory, if memory serves me correctly, I remember being told that it's only about 8% of the teachers of mathematics in the high school qualify to teach the subject. Now, if 60% of the students who are going to high school did not obtain a passing grade, and then when you reach to high school, you have less than 50% of those who are now teaching being qualified to do so, don't we see that as a recipe for disaster for the children who need to learn this critical area?
All right, well, first of all, you know, I earlier...
Mr. Speak in the mic, please.
My mic is here, Minister.
The one before you.
Well, member, I was tempted. I was tempted. Did you get your answer? You prefer to get it that way? No, sir. Oh, all right. All right. I was tempted when you asked the question to say that I need a little time to check the veracity of what you were saying. As it turned out, I nonetheless had the opportunity to consult with the leadership of the ministry, and they indicated that there were only 27 students, not 100, that were placed in Discovery Bay High School. Well, you need a new chairman, probably. But the fact is that it was only 27. And in any event, they are placed on the basis of their performance. Remember, understand me. There's no discretion other than those that are done manually, and it's a handful. I think it's about 3,000 manually. All students are placed by computer, which is by a certain formula that is worked out by experts. So there's no human element in the selection. What caused them to be there, my dear brethren, is their performance. And it happened that they did not perform to a particular level, and it would have been on their request sheet as to where they would like to be placed. So in both cases, they requested it, and in the other case, they didn't reach up to the levels that they would have liked to get so that they could go to other schools. But don't be worried about that, because the Discovery Bay School is going to be upgraded and is going to be made efficient, as is every school, which is our ambition, to upgrade all schools, so that no one has to worry about where they are placed. That is the point. You can't be worrying about where you're getting placed. You get confused with your education program. And our objective is to make them all improve, all the schools.
Minister Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Parliament
Order,
is
please.
The Parliament
Order,
is hereby
please.
informed of the report on Petrojam's strategic review as requested by the Cabinet of Jamaica, which is attached at Appendix 1 of this ministry paper. If you will recall, Mr. Speaker, on September 4th of last year, Cabinet appointed the Petrojam Review Committee, called PRC for short, to examine certain issues relating to governance and what strategic direction the company should pursue. The Petrojam Review Committee's objectives and function included a review of the following: the current plans for upgrade of the refinery and assess them in relation to possible alternatives and against realistic options in respect of the future strategic path for the petroleum sector in the national interest, including considerations in relation to energy security. Another objective was the pricing policy, taking account of the regional and international petroleum products industry and market. Number 3, the structure, corporate positioning and ownership of the refinery, the existing institutional and management arrangements with a view to recommending systemic improvements in the interest of good governance, and any other factors thought to be critical to the proper functioning and growth of Petrojam. The recommendations of the Petrojam Review Committee are as follows. Petrojam, in the interest of good governance, should adhere to the established GOJ policy guidelines and processes. Specifically, the committee notes that Petrojam must conform to Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, Financial Audit and Administration Act, GOJ's Accountability Framework, the Corporate Governance Framework for Public Bodies, all the laws of Jamaica, and in particular all laws and regulations concerning the petroleum trade. Recruit to the board persons who are technically competent and experienced in the petroleum industry worldwide and independent of company management. The board should have in its composition or as an advisor, expert with the competence to provide petroleum industry advice and perspective independent of the company's management. Petrojam's management, separate from its board, needs to clearly own, champion, and be measured as to their ability to execute the various improvement programs as a critical priority. Relating to pricing, the following were recommended. With the exception of price adjustments related to terminal fees, rack fees, and the custom administration fee, no other price adjustments should be applied by Petrojam without the oversight of an independent authority. The impact of all price adjustments should now be reported by Petrojam separately on its financials, as keeping track of such adjustments above the CIF, which is the cost, insurance, and freight pricing, allows for a better understanding of the contribution of these market adjustments and facilitates the ongoing management and reporting of their impact. Government should immediately begin the process of establishing an appropriate regulatory framework for the petroleum industry, including oversight, with a maximum price at the terminal rack that incorporates the CIF costs, terminal fees, and taxes, but restricts or eliminates the use of other adjustments which are to be approved only by the nominated regulator. Regulations should also require that all terminals operating in Jamaica be obliged to post prices at the same time. GOJ should appoint an independent expert to the current pricing committee at Petrojam. This independent expert should be mandated to ensure that the prices posted by Petrojam adhere to the GOJ's new pricing policy. The Ministry of Energy should examine opportunities for increasing the number of marketing companies and instituting other measures to increase competition in the distribution and retail value chain. The Review Committee said transfer or active management of the refinery and terminal should be done to the private sector, as this provides the only credible opportunity to improve the operating performance of both entities while also mitigating the operating and project execution risk to the government. Government to commission a petroleum industry expert team to chart a course for the government's exit from the operational management of Petrojam. Petrojam to make every effort in the short term to maximize processing of sweet crudes to reduce production of high sulfur fuel oil and increase production of more marketable low sulfur fuel oil. Petrojam to immediately commence commercial investigation of the best arrangements for long-term supply of sweet crude feedstocks. Petrojam to also commence market investigations for the potential sale of low sulfur fuel oils. Further detailed feasibility studies be conducted as part of the efforts of the enterprise team to include a detailed engineering design that would determine the process plant improvements required for the refinery to enable processing extra light crudes such as the Eagle Ford or Permian crudes from the USA. Discontinuation of the pursuit of the VDU or the RUP, which is the refinery upgrade projects. Petrojam's management be tasked to undertake a major cost reduction effort with a targeted 20% reduction in current operating costs of the refinery. Petrojam management be tasked to implement an operations improvement program. Management should define with refinery consultants Solomon Associates the potential improvement in the operation that can be achieved and prepare a defined work plan to achieve such improvements. Further analysis of the potential improvements in operation of the terminal to allow for a lower cost operation, including demurrage costs, reception of larger product cargoes, product blending capabilities, and rack loading operations. Mr. Speaker, these are the major recommendations. I want to thank the 10-member committee team for their tremendous contribution of time and effort to this process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Paulwell.
Mr. Speaker, as you can appreciate, the report having been presented today, in fact, just to be clear, I did receive a copy yesterday, but I'm unable to do the requisite consultation because I think there are some far-reaching issues that arise in the report which will require significant consideration on our part. So I will, and I'm sure there's no intention for us to have a debate at this stage. I'm pleased that the Prime Minister has announced that there will be no mad rush to implement the committee's recommendations as yet, but that there will be some time for the public to consider the report and for their own inputs to be accepted by the government. And in that regard, I believe that it's an appropriate report for the Economy and Production Committee of Parliament to have a look at and probably to interview members of the committee and to allow for broad-based interaction. I'm aware that the Energy Council has also been re-established, and I don't want to preempt you, but I think it might be a body also that ought to receive the report. Minister, just a few questions I want to raise in relation to certain aspects. Firstly, I wasn't aware until the report came out that there was a consultant team that was involved in doing the work, the technical work. And I think the team that was used was a Gaffney, Klein and Associates. I know that the ministry had used before Muse and Stencil to do other technical work. So I'm just wondering why the change, if this was done by proper procurement, and probably you could indicate to us what is the cost of the consultancy work here. Perhaps if you could just answer that, and then I'll just make one other comment.
Well, the current consultant that was used Just to put them in perspective, they are an industry expert. They've been around for many, many decades now, and they really looked at, I mean, the report says it in terms of analyzing the financials, doing wide consultations across the industry. They are just a management consultant in the industry, and I think their focus was different from New Standstill, which was really a valuation focus of New Standstill. It's saying, looking at the operations, if we were going to go forward with it, what would be the value? This focus here was looking at the operations of the entity, laying out all the options that are available to government, so that when the cabinet reads the report, when it considers it, it knows that if it goes down road A, here are the implications for going down road A versus road B versus road C versus road D. So it was a different kind of consultation. I don't have the precise cost here. Can I give you an approximation and I can come back? I think a ballpark figure was like about $65 million.
You said $65 million? That's the consultancy. Minister, the report presupposes that the issue involving the 49% stake by PDVSA has been settled based on the law that was passed there. Can you say definitively that that is the case? Especially, we have heard recently that the person in charge of the parliament in Venezuela, Mr. Guaido, has asked for some reprieve. Can you say definitively what is the situation now with that 49% shares? Is there a pending arbitration, legal matter? Could you just clarify for me?
So based on the act that was passed in Parliament in February of this year, the government now owns 100% shares in Petrojam. The act contemplated that there could be claims, and so it set out a pathway how to deal with that when that arises. The government also contemplated that, well, not contemplated, it was a decision that it would pay for the 49% interest that it compulsory acquire. It was never the case that we would take it and not pay for it. So there is sitting in escrow right now a certain sum of funds waiting for the claims that would come. And so this is where we are now, and it's a process, like I said, that was described in the Act as to how to deal with the claims. And I'm going to ask my colleague AG if she would like to add anything to this, because all the letters, all the correspondence is at the AG's office right now.
Yes, I just want to be, the question I'm asking is whether or not there have been claims made. Is there any legal process being pursued or otherwise in relation to the 49% stake by PDVSA?
Okay. All right. Remember, I mean, as I said earlier on, the Act provides for there to be a claim on the funds, and we've been notified that this process is going to be or has been activated in terms of the claim. So it's the beginning of that process.
So a claim or claims have been made by interested parties against the government of Jamaica in relation to the 49% shares?
We've been notified of one claim from PDVSA, Carib. And it's, it's in keeping with the provision of the Act.
The claim has been made where, and you mentioned by PDVSA. Where has this claim been made, and where are we in that process?
In the Supreme Court, member, as has been provided for in the law. But I mean, as I said earlier, all the documents, all the letters are being reviewed by the Attorney General. And at that time, when I'm advised by her office, then I will make a statement.
All right, so I'm just trying to be absolutely clear because I was not aware. So there has been a claim raised by PDVSA made in the Supreme Court of Jamaica. And that matter is being dealt with. Probably the AG might want to explain.
Member, in due course, the Minister will provide all of the information. We have been advised that the provisions of the law will be activated through the courts in respect of the compensation clause. I understand the desire to have the details, but as the Minister indicated, she will be provided with a full brief, and at that time, I do believe that she will make the necessary statement, ministerial statement, to update the Parliament. So we crave your kind indulgence until such time.
Just going back to the report, I wonder if the Minister will agree that this is a report that should and could be presented to the Economy and Production Committee for full hearing and discussion. And you would agree with that process?
So, member, just to be clear, is that a suggestion, a recommendation? I will certainly take that recommendation, and I will do the necessary consideration, and we'll let you know in a very short period of time. Okay. Mr. Speaker, on another statement to the Parliament, this is to advise that Cabinet has approved the re-establishment of the Jamaica Energy Council, a national decision-making body to see to the continuity of policy and sustainable development of the island's energy sector. The Council aims to facilitate consensus and minimize the negative influence of partisan and other forms of special interest groups and individuals on the energy sector. The body will be chaired by the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology and comprise representatives of the following entities: Opposition Spokesman on Energy, Consumer Affairs Commission, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Ministry of Transport and Mining, Ministry of Local Government and Community Development, Planning Institute of Jamaica, Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, Jamaica Solar Energy Association, Jamaica Gasoline Retailers Association, Jamaica Promotions Corporation, Development Bank of Jamaica, Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Jamaica Institute of Engineers, Jamaica Institute of Architects, Bureau of Standards Jamaica, and academia. Mr. Speaker, for background, the Jamaica Energy Council was initially established by a decision of Cabinet on March 12, 2012. It is supported by the National Energy Policy 2008 to 2030, which provides the framework to pursue a comprehensive program for improving our island's energy efficiency, facilitate fuel source diversification, and long-term energy security. The Jamaica Energy Council will focus on energy conservation and efficiency, as well as the development of clean and renewable energy sources. The following subject areas stand as some of the main focus areas under the purview of the Jamaica Energy Council: energy policies, energy conservation and efficiency and public education, electricity, both light and power, development of energy resources, including but not limited to solar, wind, hydro, waste to energy, biomass, geothermal, and ocean thermal energy sources, alternative energy resources, including but not limited to natural gas, and conventional energy resources, including but not limited to petroleum, oil and gas exploration, petroleum refinery haulage, storage, and distribution, energy access for urban and rural electrification, and governance framework for the energy sector towards achieving the energy policy goals. Mr. Speaker, letters are being dispatched to the various entities with an eye to convening its first meeting by the end of September. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine how delighted I am that after 3 years of clamoring and beseeching, we want to commend the Minister for reinstituting the Jamaica Energy Council. It was a good body to have been established in 2012, and as the member from North Central St. Andrew and Western St. Mary, they can attest, it was a fine body of stakeholders coming together to implement the national energy policy. So I think it augurs well, and to take this issue of energy outside the realm of the cut and thrust of competitive politics and to see it as a national objective of having energy security. Just one question, Minister. I am suggesting that you might want to contemplate the voice of the workers on this, the Jamaican workers, on this Energy Council, and probably might want to consult with the joint trade unions to see how the workers' voice could be properly represented. I noticed that I don't see PCJ and Petrojam on it, but I suspect they would be there regardless as a part of the ministry. So I'm assuming that PCJ and Petrojam will also sit when the Energy Council sit as well.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to say I look forward to working with Member Paulwell on this council. He brings to it his knowledge, having commissioned it, or having that cabinet of which he was a part commissioned it. I always believe that successive governments should continue the good policies of prior governments. That's the only way we can accelerate our economy. Thank you.
Mr. Shemura. Order, please. Proceed.
You go down there. It's public business. Huh? Huh? Announcements, yeah. No, go on, man. No. Announcements. Just announcements, and then you go to
announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Ministry Paper number 35, entitled The National Water Sector Policy and Implementation Plan 2019 and the National Water Sector Policy and Implementation Plan 2019. Ministry Paper number 36, entitled Annual Reports and Financial Statements of the National Irrigation Commission for the year ended March 31, 2015, and the reports are also attached. Ministry Paper number 38, Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, 2019 sitting of the primary exit profile.
Bills brought from the Senate.
following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honorable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 28th day of June 2019, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Income Tax Act to provide for an increase in the personal income tax threshold, to provide for an initial allowance on capital expenditure in respect of the purchase for renovation of industrial buildings, to give permanent effect to matters previously effected provisionally and for connected matters, was passed in the Senate without amendment. Signed, Thomas Tavares Vinson, CDQCJP, President of the Senate.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally, questions and answers to questions. Mr. Tweed.
Mr. Speaker, last week an assurance was given that questions in my name, number 9, on the question notice paper would be answered today. I'm awaiting your confirmation of that.
Mr. Simuda, do you have an answer for Mr. Tweed?
Speaker, we would have to ask for permission to allow us to take questions as we have passed question time. But that notwithstanding, the fact of the matter is that, yes, the minister's question, an undertaking was given to have it done, and we will certainly seek to respond. But as you know, as you might have gleaned, the Prime Minister has left for CARICOM and will not be back until the end of the week, so that next week I will ensure that the question is answered. Okay? But I'd even suggested to you that you could redirect your question. I already answered one for you that was not due yet in today's ministry on the statement I made, in that we will indeed be providing these measurements. But by all means, if you wish to redirect it to me, then whether the Prime Minister is here or not, I would respond.
Mr. Speaker, I never knew I had that liberty. I don't fully understand the arrangements, but if I just want the answer to the questions. So if you will permit me to redirect it to the Minister with responsibility for education rather than the Prime Minister, who I understand to be the substantive minister, and if that is procedurally in order, then of course I'd like to do that. And I do thank the Minister for his response in early time to question number 16. And as I'm on my feet, Mr. Speaker, perhaps you could inquire for me the other questions in my name to other ministers which are outstanding. I do understand the predicament of the Prime Minister today.
I understand you say that questions are not ready, answers are not ready, and you will advise us?
I will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the appropriate ministers will respond to questions. It's a matter that we take seriously, and we'll make
motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sittings of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker,
motions for leave
I now move
bills.
to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Customs Act 2019.
A bill shortly entitled the Customs Act 2019 read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Public business.
Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the practice in the sectoral debates, I'm inviting you to ask the member from Westmoreland Western to make an opposition spokesman on tourism to make his contribution at this time. He will be followed by the member from Western St. Andrew, who has a very interesting submission. He seems surprised at the fact that we are calling on him. Perhaps he hadn't looked at the order paper, but nonetheless, he was supposed, in the unlikely event that you're not ready to do it today, you could advise us and we will postpone it for another day.
Mr. Chairman, I would much oblige. I had a previous meeting in another court, not this one, today, and I just arrived a few minutes ago. So may I request that it be put over to another time, another date, when I am so prepared to address.
In a different atmosphere, I would say that I would have to charge the leader of opposition business for not having communicated. But we won't do that today because we have had a good day. So we will see to it that you make your contribution next week.
Dr. McNeill? Mr. Vita.
That's campaigning. Too sad. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by acknowledging you, the clerk, and the entire staff of the House for the support that you give us here in this, the People's House. I would like to thank the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Peter David Phillips, for the able and powerful support he has given me and for the rock-solid confidence he has placed in me in handing me this portfolio. Mr. Speaker, I have to thank my family who is not here today. My mother, Valerie, my beautiful wife, Sheila, and our two children, Jordan and Ashley, for their love and support and tolerance over the years. Tolerance. It's something all of us in this house. We need a lot of tolerance. Thanks to my personal staff for their hard work, loyalty, and commitment. Mr. Speaker, I also owe a debt of gratitude to my councillors, the constituency executive, and the people of Western Westmoreland for their support and love that they have given me over the years. Mr. Speaker, I'm truly blessed to have the best constituency in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, today in my contribution to the debate, I'm going to be focusing on some topical issues in the tourism industry, providing an overview of the sector and concluding by suggesting a way forward. Mr. Speaker, tourism is doing well. However, there is work to do. We must deepen the opportunities provided by the multi-million-dollar sector and spread the wealth among Jamaicans up and down across this beautiful island of ours. Let us begin with the issue of ensuring that our workers in the sector are provided for in their winter years. Mr. Speaker, the recent passing of the Tourism Pensions Act signals what can possibly be a new day for tourism workers in Jamaica. It can change the fortune of our greatest asset, our people. And for that, I'm happy that the minister has finally brought the bill to its conclusion. But, Mr. Speaker, a seminal moment in this process took place in 2017, when after deep consultation and assessment, I determined that trying to push individual pensions in the tourism industry was futile, and what was needed was a contributory pension scheme. And in this regard, I want to place on record my heartfelt thanks and congratulations to two sets of people. The Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, who in 2015, the association's leadership and I, as Minister of Tourism, signed a memorandum of understanding. That MOU has borne fruit and led to this watershed moment. And secondly, the Pensions Advisory Council, which I had set up and which was chaired by Daisy Coke. Mr. Speaker, the Council worked with us from 2014 and continued straight through both administrations to the passing of the Act. However, Mr. Speaker, having passed the Act, we have to go further. We have to ensure that all our tourism workers can benefit from this scheme. At present, thousands of workers in the industry operate under the contract employment practice. The excitement in the industry surrounding the passing of the Pensions Act has been tempered by concerns of workers who don't feel they'll be able to participate. You as a member with a lot of tourism workers will find that. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm again urging the Minister to have this matter addressed in the regulations and in a timely manner. We have to ensure that this pension scheme, that the contributions are paid from the employers, whoever they may be. Also, Mr. Speaker, for the scheme to have its full impact, it must expand beyond the accommodation sector to all the workers in the industry. I am calling on the Minister to lead by example by ensuring that for those workers in sector affiliated to government, the Tourism Ministry must pay the employees' contribution and ensure that these workers are vested in the scheme. I am recommending that they start with the RAF captains, which is a point I've made before, and others employed by the Tourism Product Development Company, and send a signal of the government's commitment to this pension scheme. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the state of emergency. Mr. Speaker, this year the government implemented a state of emergency in St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland. While it seems to be suppressing the crime problem in Westmoreland, it is also having a severe negative effect on small businesses. Mr. Speaker, last week, I met with some small entrepreneurs in Negril. The pan chicken man, the shopkeeper, the street vendors, the entertainment sector, the small bars, the corner shops and restaurants, they're all crying out. Mr. Speaker, they have seen a real downturn in their earnings. Week before last, Friday at 9 o'clock, I drove in to Negril out of a meeting in the constituency. I drove on Norman Manley Boulevard, and when I went there, nothing was open. Everything was closed. There wasn't a pan chicken man, not a drinks, nothing. Everything locked down at 9 o'clock. I had to turn around and drive back into the town to one of the larger establishments to purchase some bottled water. And so the people feel that the business is being transferred from the small businesses to the big businesses. And that unfair treatment is being meted out to them. What makes it worse is that early next month, there'll be Dream Weekend. And venues will be open until all hours of the morning. And it is felt that those who will benefit are the external entrepreneurs. Then once it is over, the place will again be locked down. Mr. Speaker, we need Dream Weekend in Negril. It has done remarkably well for the economy down there. but it is my firm belief that the same treatment given to one must be given to all. Do you see how this looks and why people say that it is only prosperity for a few? The jerk chicken man, the jerk chicken man will not sell off his product by 9 o'clock. He's now told that he has to be off the street by 9. Normally they're coming at 9 o'clock. We eat at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. So he can't sell off his product by 9 o'clock on a normal night. So what is he to do? The little man has to come off the road, but the big man is allowed his time. We must find a better way that satisfies both the control and or eradication of crime without inflicting irreparable harm to the earning abilities of our citizens. Absolutely. Yeah. As I have said to the leadership of the Constabulary Force and to the political directorate, it cannot be beyond us to find a solution that controls crime but still allows the small man an opportunity. But this requires consultation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, consensus. In fact, Mr. Speaker, just last Saturday night, permission was given for a party in the grill called Painted. The pan chicken man was out till midnight. The small hotels saw increased occupancy and the local economy stirred. And all of this without one incident of crime. Mr. Speaker?
So it was in breach?
No, we had the consultation and had a discussion and it went on. So what we want, no, I don't think you have to change it. I think it has to do with the curfews that are put on. Mr. Speaker, for the record, when I voted in support of this state of emergency, it was with certain conditions, as this was not my preferred route to crime fighting. I had expressed that a state of emergency cannot be in perpetuity. It cannot just go on forever. We had requested that there must be further consultation with all the stakeholders, because crime is not just something that can be dealt with by the government and the police alone. We had asked that there be an examination of the concerns of the business community, especially the small entrepreneurs, which I'm pointing out today has become a reality. Mr. Speaker, we had specifically requested that statistics be provided to the House to enable us to assess the effectiveness of the state of emergency when the time comes for us to review it. We had also asked for the passage of enabling legislation to fight crime, such as the DNA Act. Yes. And I, Mr. Speaker, I had requested social programs which have been repeatedly promised, but I have still not received one social program external to CDF or our implementation from the government, although over a year ago I was promised from as higher office as the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are not going to fight this crime solely by hard measures, state of emergency, if you do not put in the social measures. The minute you take off the state of emergency, you're going to return exactly where we came from. Mr. Speaker, the initial 3-month period is well underway, and very few of these issues have been addressed, and I'm sure that the spokesperson will deal with them more fulsomely next week. The Speaker, I want to turn to some projects in Negril. So, Speaker, when the Tourism Enhancement Fund was created, it was created to transform and enhance our tourism product and provide a consistent boost to our marketing activities. During my time in office, we had embarked on a number of transformational projects in all resort areas. We completed the lighting of the Elegant Corridor in Montego Bay, streetscaping in Falmouth, the cruise ship pier in Ocho Rios, the Sheffield to Negril Road in Negril, as well as the shared pathway in Negril. But, Mr. Speaker, there were a number of projects, particularly in Negril, that had undergone consultation, received approvals, funding had been sought and approved by the Tourism Enhancement Fund, and in some cases, contracts had gone out to tender. Many of these projects have subsequently stalled. These include the Norman Manley Beach Park, the Negril Craft Market, which the minister in his second month in office visited the craft market and made a commitment to continue with that project to the craft traders, and the lighting of the shared pathway, which has not been completed and about which the police constantly are speaking to myself and the Chamber of Commerce, because a lot of the robberies and hold-ups, knife and so forth are happening on the shared pathway, and we have not been able to get the lighting. Over the last 3 years, meetings have been held, promises made to me, the Negril Chamber of Commerce and others, but to date, no follow-up on these projects that are important to Negril. Mr. Speaker, approximately 25% of all the stopover visitors that come to Jamaica, and consequently the earnings of TF, 25% of the $6 billion that comes in every year, $6 billion, and 25% of those visitors come from Negril. I raise this point because although the minister has recently asked the permanent secretary to take a look at the projects again, we are all impatient in Negril, and there's no provision in this year's budget for any of them. It is interesting, Mr. Speaker, that ground was broken on the beach park in Montego Bay, a project that I had initiated the design phase for, gotten the architects, while at that point the Negril Beach Park was completed and put out to tender, and ground has been broken on that one, and the Negril Beach Park still languishes. The only thing I can say is over to you, Minister Bartlett. You could. Mr. Speaker, I now want to turn to the small and medium sector. Mr. Speaker, the small and medium hotels, the villas, the apartments, a lot of what makes and defines Jamaica and the character of our tourism product in Jamaica are the small and medium hotels. As a matter of fact, if you look at the surveys that we do, a lot of the persons who come here and stay at the villas and the apartments, the ratings are off the charts. You know, they come, get a big villa, have a couple bedrooms, 2-3 families, the kids there, they have the swimming pool, they go out to eat breakfast in the morning, they move around the countryside. Great ratings. While we continue to get acceptable growth rates in arrivals, this is disproportionate to large properties. Many of our small hotels and villas and apartments continue to struggle. Mr. Speaker, we cannot just focus on growth in visitor arrivals and overall spend. We must also look at the impact of tourism on the local economy. When we speak of the average retention of the tourism dollar being between 30 and 40%, in these smaller properties, it is closer to 80%. They buy in the supermarket and from small farmers. Their visitors walk out into the community, purchase food on the road at the restaurants and corner shops. So we must have an interest in protecting them. many of these small properties remain vulnerable because a large part of the sector is now vertically integrated. The companies building the hotels now own not just the hotel, but they own the plane that is bringing the tourist, the visitor. They own the travel agency, they're affiliated with the tour operator, and they own the destination management company. They're buying the buses to move them now. These small properties do not have the ability to market in the economies of scale or to bulk buy airline seats as a larger conglomerates can. Mr. Speaker, I'm recommending that the government increase its support for this grouping. And there are two areas that we can examine to help them with their sales and marketing. I'm suggesting that we relook at 1-800-JAMAICA. Remember our telephone line, 1-800-JAMAICA, and the ads that we had overseas, we'd always have at the end, 1-800-JAMAICA. It's a very valuable number. We closed it down years ago because at the time, the parent company, Jamaica Reservation Service, was losing money. And we had Air Jamaica Vacations at the time running, and so it was almost competing, performing the same performing the same function. But I believe that bringing back 1-800-JAMAICA, along with a strong online presence, targeting this group, the smaller sector, and twinning with Jamaica Vacations, that's JAMVAC. JAMVAC is our agency that does seat support. So they get about $4 to $6 million US a year, and what they do is the charters that come in, they give them support. These persons could come together, and what they would do is allow our smaller properties to sell online through and pull together packages for them. So, Mr. Speaker, at present, our smaller properties now just have a site online. So they sell on their website or through travel agents and tour operators. This proposal of putting in 1-800-JAMAICA will offer a third option to them, which can help them construct cheaper packages, because with the influence of JAMVAC and JTB, who are out there supporting the airlines, supporting the other partners in the industry, they can assist with pulling together bulk rates and allow the smaller properties to now come together and merge and pull together. And it doesn't have to be even the government that has to operate it. They could probably look at getting private sector to get involved in it. At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I think these thoughts are worthy of consideration, because this sector is a sector that we must protect if we want the character of our tourism to remain what it is. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to ganja, sensimilla, weed, cannabis. Mr. Speaker, what role should ganja have with tourism? In 2015, the previous administration decriminalized the use of cannabis in Jamaica. Decriminalized. At that point, we were among the few forward-thinking countries that had taken such a bold move. At that time, we were ahead of the curve. 4 years later, is that still the case? According to recently published statistics, and these statistics were published, and 37,000 acres of ganja is grown in Jamaica. This is something that was put out by the United Nations. 37,000 acres. With its multiple crop cycles, this translates to a production of roughly 66 million pounds of ganja per year. And up to that point, all of this was illegal. Given the estimated value of between 9,000 and 22,000 Jamaican dollars per pound, this equates to an astonishing $1.48 trillion, or approximately 70% of our GDP. Now, when I saw this as a published figure, I can't imagine 70% of GDP. Whatever the fraction of this you want to take as a reality, Mr. Speaker, it is undoubtedly a potentially huge industry that must be developed. Are we missing the boat? Or the flight? Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, there are tremendous opportunities in strengthening the linkages between ganja and tourism. I will readily say that this is not for every tourism entity, but there are opportunities for those that are so suited. Already, Mr. Speaker, an interesting thing happened. I was talking to some persons about this, and I said to them, and they said to me, well, you know that what some people, when they talk about Airbnb, to some people Airbnb is air, bed and bud. And they're talking about sesame and bun. So it's not breakfast, but air, bed and bud. So it is imperative, and bud, air, bed and bud. So it is imperative that the Ministry of Tourism formulate a policy framework to define its position on cannabis in the tourism industry, and it must do so quickly because we're missing the boat. Mr. Speaker, what opportunities could this bring? First, it would bring a new retail market for marijuana. Persons in those hotels that so qualified, if they are selling there, it gives you a retail stream. In those properties that would be deemed fit, dispensaries would create a retail outlet for the legal sale of marijuana. This further gives us the opportunity for branding the product, such as, for example, Orange Hill Ganja. You know, they had the festival in the grill, and they brought in all the brands from all countries, and I didn't know if they were going to invite me as a judge, but the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, Orange Hill Ganja came out as one of the top. So it allows for the branding.
I agree.
This source of funds from the direct retail market can be used by the farmers, for development, to ensure that we do not fall behind in the technological commercial world market that is now being developed. One of the problems is persons know Jamaica for ganja. They talk about it. But the truth of the matter is that right now, people are developing it themselves. If you have epilepsy, you have one. If you have a pain in the left shoulder, you have another one. It's becoming very specific. And what has to happen is we need to stay ahead of that curve. And that sort of research and development is going to need dedicated funding. And so one of the areas is if we can get the retail market to give the farmers and the developers some capital. Investors have already indicated that they would join in partnership with the farmers to help finance a resource for this development. Our local farmers would truly benefit. There's also the opportunity for tours. These can be set up for those who want to visit approved farms and would be in addition to the attraction market. Again, your farmers and growers would benefit. You know, there could be a lot of tours given in certain areas of my constituency. So there's already there's already product. There's already product. Not only that, there's also the health and wellness market and all the spa and medicinal offshoots of ganja, marijuana, and it's another unexplored frontier in the industry. There are things being done, but a lot more can be done. The Minister of Tourism announced something about health and wellness market 2.5 years ago, but since then, nothing has happened. To us, all of this seems like a no-brainer to do some of these things, but we haven't seen the action. And on top of that, there are some real challenges. The government, some time ago, gave 2 special zone licenses, one to Accompong and one to Orange Hill for the growing of marijuana. Since then, the Westmoreland Hemp and Ganja Farmers Association, WAGFA, who are the farmers of Orange Hill, have been trying to acquire land, which has been identified, and it's a massive piece of land. The land is owned by the Commissioner of Lands, and despite this, they still cannot get a leasehold. So the land is there, they've been applying, and they still cannot get a leasehold. Meanwhile, investors who have flown down and looked at it are on standby, waiting on the location. I've spoken to the minister with responsibility for industry, agriculture, and fisheries, and he's aware of the situation. But we need to move on it quickly because, again, it's just on standby. Another problem is that the Cannabis Licensing Authority.
The member's time for speaking has expired.
No, madam, of 30 minutes.
House Leader.
Well, no, man. So how do you know how long I was speaking?
How do you know how long I must start? You need about 5 minutes.
Yeah, man. I'm almost.
House Leader.
10 minutes, man.
Marlene.
Mr. Speaker, may the Speaker's time be extended sufficiently to allow him to conclude his presentation.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? As of it, Dr. McNeill.
I move for a changing of the guard with regard to the House Leader. All right. Very good. Another problem, Mr. Speaker, is that the Cannabis Licensing Authority licenses the properties that apply for the dispensaries, but the role of the Jamaica Tourist Board is uncertain in tourism entities, as they also play a part in the licensing process. The recommendation of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association is that these properties, those properties that want to apply and qualify, should be allowed to go ahead, but there's still an uncertainty about the way forward in the sector. Mr. Speaker, we need the Minister of Tourism and the Ministry of Tourism to outline a formal policy framework to govern cannabis in the tourism sector, including how they intend to or not to act as a catalyst for the Cannabis Society. What is their true position? And secondly, the Ministry of Agriculture and the Commissioner of Lands need to work together with local producers, such as WAGFA, to formalize them and allow us to make the appropriate linkages to facilitate this potentially huge economic contributor and to make it a reality. Mr. Speaker, in closing, our tourism arrivals continue to grow. A major influence in this growth is the number of new hotels that have opened up in the industry. We on this side of the House have played a significant role in making this success a reality as we lay the foundation on which it is being built. The surge in investment started in 2013 and continues to today, and it did not come by chance. It came through strong, positive economic policies that were planned and executed and that placed Jamaica in a positive light and made it attractive to investment. To this end, Mr. Speaker, we must congratulate the then Prime Minister, Portia Simpson Miller, and the Minister of Finance of the time, Dr. Peter Phillips, who made these changes. Among the changes made was the implementation of the Omnibus, or Fiscal Incentives Act, which has allowed, and many outside of the sector do not see the influence of this, but it allows the older, smaller properties in the industry to get incentives so they can refurbish. So what has happened is before you had the Hotels Incentives Act, it was just the big and the newer hotels that would get it. But now, the old and the smaller hotels, so what you have is that this part of the sector has been able to refurbish for the first time at last. We have also seen the increase in the retention of tourism earnings. The minister came and spoke about it moving from 30 to a reported 40 or 42%. This is commendable. And I want to congratulate the Tourism Linkages Hub, set up in the Ministry of Tourism by me, for the fine work that they continue to do even today. Mr. Speaker, it is important to promote a synergy between the different sectors of our economy and tourism. There's great potential there. We still have a lot of work to do to expand these linkages even further. And as I pointed out today, there are real opportunities for us in the ganja industry. As I indicated earlier, this has been a good year for tourism, and we have finally passed the long-awaited Pensions Act. And while there's still work to be done to make it more effective, we must not lose sight, Mr. Speaker, of the bigger picture that we must address in a meaningful way. That is the condition under which tourism workers operate, especially with regard to the use of the contract system in the industry. We on this side of the House have given our commitment to address this issue as a matter of priority. Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that our employees in the sector are empowered. We have to ensure that our craft traders, our taxi operators, the ordinary person who makes a living from tourism feels that it is an inclusive industry and that he has an opportunity there. They want to be a part of the success story too. We must recognize that our industry cannot thrive without virtually every Jamaican feeling that they have a vested interest in it. Strong numbers and indicators mean very little if the ordinary Jamaican is not feeling the gains. Right now, it is largely pains for them, not gains. We have a good thing going. Let us not become complacent. Now is the time to step it up a few notches. Let us spread the opportunities and the wealth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for having indulged me today. Thank you.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business. I therefore ask that the House be adjourned until next Tuesday.
Those against? Ayes have it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.